Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces, episode 108. It is currently 104 in Kitsap County, and we're so glad that you could join us today for this provocative and riveting hour. As always, I'm here, Marwan Cameron, but more importantly, Mark Boatwright Frost is here to enlighten us, to provoke our thought process, to encourage us to bring our piece to the puzzle. So, with no further ado, let me bring Mark Boatwright Frost forward. Hello.
Okay, so you want me to come into this choking on laughter to speak? Got it.
How are
Oh,
you doing?
I am doing way better now than I was a minute ago. I needed a good laugh today, and we all may need one after talking about what we're going to talk about today.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so the next two. The bow tie today. Cool. Okay, Rob is talking about his bow tie. His bow tie rocks.
Yes, it does.
Let's get an applause, everybody, for the bow tie. All right. So the next two episodes, this one is going to talk about process and outcomes, and it's not probably going to be the straight line you expect it to be, but we will address that as we address that. Next week is our topic is dominoes,
Mm.
and we're going to be talking about dominoes and consequences.
Okay.
And how things fall. And I think it's a beautiful tie on to what we're going to be talking about today. So
let's jump in.
So let's jump in. Why don't you pop up the? I started off today by putting something in the chat, a quote by Albert Einstein, who once said that in theory, practice and theory are identical, and in practice, they are not. So let's look at what theory is. And I was mentioning to Marwan before the show that my trouble with using definitions from dictionaries is the dictionary's job is to present the common usage, not the usage of the word. This is a trap that we get into when we've talked about words lots of times and how they evolve. Sometimes they don't evolve in good ways. Theory is a way we use to explain things that we don't understand. But a theory is only an idea or a concept until it is proven. Now we use theory as if it's already proven, as in conspiracy theory. None of that makes any is proven or true or known to be true. It is just an idea that somebody has put out there that is grasped onto by people. And even Darwin's theory of evolution is being challenged now and how it was understood and how it's been related, if not in how the science was applied. So the things we say are human nature might not be human nature according to Darwin and evolution, but they are human usage as we present it now, as theory is being presented as something more than an idea or a concept that has been unproven. So when Einstein says theory, he means an unproven concept. His theory of relativity is held as law by so many physicists, and yet it is by nature a theory, an idea, a concept based on good math, but not irrefutable. And as we learn more, that may be challenged. Let's keep in mind that a theory is an idea. It is not a fact or a known reality. And it won't be a known reality until we prove it. And proof is sometimes very difficult, and sometimes we don't have the information at this time to prove it. But if we hold it as law, we may not put the effort out to actually prove it or to revise it as is necessary. I think I just got Marwan, so.
Well, I've always taken what you're saying. I find that we do operate quite often in theory, right? Capitalism is a theory.
Yeah.
Socialism is a theory, and we have decided that we're going to be a capitalistic society. And obviously, it's not perfect, and we're not going to know, which way is better ultimately, unless you really give both sides an earnest try, or if there's some kind of hybrid, which is what I advocate for. that might be a better theory.
Well, and capitalism was a theory that was practicable until it was in practice and actually performing as it was originally set to practice until we did something that changed it. And we're going to talk about that shortly. So the next one is we're going to talk about practice, what practice is. The actual application or use of an idea, a belief, or a method. So if a theory is an idea, a belief, or a method, and we practice it, we'll learn real quick whether it works or not, won't we?
Yeah.
And so the whole idea is that a theory has to be put into practice. And as Einstein said, in practice, theory and practice are not necessarily identical and frequently aren't identical.
Well, you know what? I would say I don't know if we would know immediately in all circumstances.
No, but
Sometimes
in several.
they take a while. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it just depends on what the theory is.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be fair.
And now we're going to talk about the actual theme of the subject of the show today. Let's talk about process.
All right.
A series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. Now, a lot of process comes from theory. So let's talk about capitalism for a moment.
Sure.
And it's and I did this show a while back that Marwan wasn't here, and we, or maybe he was, I don't know. We talked about the economy. We talked about capitalism, and basically, capitalism was in exchange. Even barter is capitalism in a form, in a very early form, but capitalism is using a coin in the earliest form to exchange for labor and materials of a product that you need. Fair enough? We
Okay.
agree on that? Okay. So then capitalism became about wealth generation somewhere in the last 100 years. And then the rules of capitalism started changing. So if we have a capitalist process and we don't manage that process, we see changes in that process that do not meet the original end of the process, which is to say, a coin for a set amount of coin for a set of labor and a product that you need for your use. So we've taken it now to electronic formats, and money is no longer money. Money is now digitized and moving around. And stock is not about supporting a company that makes a product that everybody needs. Stock is now about generating wealth. We've taken the human out of it completely, and the need out of it completely. We generate need. We have planned obsolescence so that whatever we buy is going to come apart in a year, and we're going to have more of it. So let me go back to something I talked about several episodes ago about climate and resources. We use resources like we currently have 2.5 planets. And last I checked, we only have one. I just placed an article up from NPR this week that I have followed up on several times because these articles keep coming up, that there is a fraud being perpetrated by the waste system that we are recycling. We are, in fact, not recycling. And when we do send recycling, we're sending it to Asia, who's now not recycling a lot of the stuff and are telling us what they don't want that they might recycle. So recycling is a myth. And so we are using resources like we have 2.5 planets, and we are not recycling the waste that could provide further resources for us. So the practice is in fact harming us. And the process is not actually providing the outcome we are promised. So we are in trouble because we believe that the process is going to do what we assume or believe or have been told it's going to do. In capitalism, the waste cost is not being passed on to the corporations, it's being passed on to the consumer.
Right.
And so, therefore, they don't have to pay, and it's a greater profit margin for them. Again, practice and process are not what they are set out to do, which is to say, achieve a certain goal. Now, capitalism, the goal changed from providing a product that you may use that is a good, solid product that will last you a long time and have a lot of thought and skill in it, to manipulating money for wealth. So, again, we go back to the idea of process. And I will use a couple more examples and then we'll jump into talking about it.
Okay.
I worked for a while on contract with a local state government agency, and the goal of that agency was a high and good goal, and the process they used was a good process, but they found out that they couldn't afford to meet the need. They didn't have enough money to meet the need of all the people, so they started changing the rules within the process, much like capitalism had the rules changed to do another goal. And it stopped being about serving the public and meeting that need and started being about clearing your desk of paperwork. And that's what was being measured, and that was what was being rewarded. So we have a process, and people buy into the process, and it's not meeting the need. This is, in business, this is in government. Matter of fact, I just read an article, and I have not fact checked all of it, but it proposes the theory that agencies are being defunded. Agencies are having rules rewritten so that they do not, in fact, meet the need of the people that they're supposed to be serving, but they meet the need of a special interest that is influencing the changes. And that's very possible because it happens all the time. We have a process, and processes are easily manipulated from within. So, where is, and here's starts into the conversation, where is the oversight of the process to manage it to meet the original goals or the stated goals? And that seems to be missing, and we have become a slave to process instead of using process as a tool to meet a need. And capitalism is right there. Capitalism is no longer meeting needs. Capitalism, or at least not the needs of the many, capitalism is meeting the needs of the few because they have changed the rules so that capitalism works for them but not for the rest of us. Because the goal is now wealth and not providing a product that people need and that will last and is made skillfully.
Well, and simultaneously, they make many of us co-conspirators in investing through 401ks and other retirement vehicles in the same things that they're capitalizing on
Right.
in disproportionate rates.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are all co-conspirators in the process because we all work the processes believing that they will have an outcome. But the people who develop the process to meet the outcome are no longer around. And we have been, and I take, punch me for this one, I don't care. Cancel me for this one, I don't care. We have been trained to the point that we work the process, but nobody's in charge of the process and no one's looking at the goals.
See, and that's where I diverge from you in that where you feel
Go
like
for it.
there's no one at the wheel. And
Well, there is.
that
The process is at the wheel.
but the process is being worked by the few, right? The outcomes that they want, the transfer of wealth, which has it's been happening for a long time, but we've seen this really rapid exponential increase through COVID of this transference of wealth.
And I will go back to the information age, actually starting that.
But I think there are people at the wheel that are steering that and guiding it, right?
In capitalism, I agree with you.
But this process follows itself through Congress. Folks dying, in their Senate seats, right? On the Supreme Court. Folks can't step away and allow new ideas to come and flourish, and they want to keep the status quo going. And I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you frame it, it sounds like this thing is a runaway train, and we're just literally just hitting the button, and we have no idea what's happening anymore. And my argument is, when you look at the World Economic Forum and some of the things that they're doing, saying you own nothing and love it, and just the way that they're steering the just the way social engineering how we live globally uh, is so inequitable that it is planned, and you have these powerful entities that are on board that are pushing this in this direction, and for whatever reason we are not able, although we the people globally are not able to turn the tide and turn the other way. And there's this incentive to say, hey, if you don't want to suffer, if you don't want to live in poverty, have generational poverty, if you don't want your kids to also experience what you're experiencing, then get on board. And sadly, when some of us try to make that change, we go in and we get chewed up by the machine, right? And
Yeah,
then you look up,
it's what happens when you drink the Kool-Aid.
right? Or
Look at
like
Jonestown. You drink they drink the
AOC and
Kool-Aid.
Bernie and others who are,
Yeah.
considered, mavericks and great, and then all of a sudden they're just like every other politician, and they're very mealy mouthed, or and where
Yeah.
they were hardcore
Well,
before they got in, they're just
actually, I don't think they're mealy mouthed. I think that they've just been silenced to some degree, and not through their own efforts, but through the efforts of media, which are owned by corporations, which are owned by the people who are done. But we are focused on
still don't agree
capitalism
with
here.
that.
Huh?
I still don't agree with that, because you don't hear the oh well, we had to work together, we had to compromise. When they're on the outside, they are so maverick, they're so contrary to the status quo, and they're going to dismantle and rebuild something better, and they get in there, and then it's just not the case. They make a little bit of noise, the media helps to elevate them, and then it punishes them if they get out of line too much.
And with a lot of people, I'll agree with you, but people like Bernie Sanders and such, I think they're doing the best they can with a system they know is broken.
I definitely don't agree, but and even like someone like Bernie,
and there's the point,
go.
and there's the point of this program, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we can disagree and still get to a point.
Yeah, for sure.
So in capitalism, I have no argument with you, but in bureaucracy, in both government and businesses, there are a lot of people pushing buttons and running the process, and they think somewhere along the line there. I'll give you an example at Cisco Systems.
Sure.
When I got into Cisco, it was no longer the company I wanted to be a part of. And it took me almost 10 years to get into Cisco Systems. I really wanted, because they were innovative. They took care of their people. If you had a great idea that saved the company money, they would act on it and get it done. By the time I got there, they'd gone from like 5,000 people to like 26,000 people in 18 months. And they had headquarters all over the world, and they hired people from companies they didn't want to be like, from all of the other companies. And then they suddenly had all these middle level of bureaucracy and people building little fiefdoms that ran the processes, who didn't really understand the process, certainly did not understand the culture of the system, who was then being taught by outsourced human resources people in a 2-day seminar as you came in. So the culture is basically gone. The people who manage the company are basically gone. A couple of the board members were part of the original group, but they were just there trying to be like every other company. And when the dot-com bust came, it caught them completely by surprise. So anybody with half a brain could have seen it coming. Any analyst that was worth their salt would have looked at it. But the trouble is that people weren't listening because they didn't want to hear it, because they were making so much money. Mm-hmm. One of the other things that happened during that time is a shift in innovation in our country, and the shift in small business that has pretty much broken us. We have now watched a whole series, not only in tech, but now in all the other industries, where people are inventing things and creating businesses to be bought by bigger businesses. Take their sack of cash and go away, having won, and the business that bought their tech no longer has the support for the tech, but they have this tech that they keep selling and is not being innovated or changed, because they're waiting to buy the next innovation that comes up. But small businesses are dying all over the country, and the new small business model is to create something and sell it to a big tech company for millions of dollars.
And
But
you think that that's bad because there isn't the support on
kills
the back end of it?
well, it is in support on the back end of it. It's not real innovation. It's innovating to sell something to a company that fits within their paradigm, but that paradigm's not expanding. They're not paying for R&D. They're not really innovating anymore, and they're keeping all other innovation from happening because the resources are all locked into their space.
So I hear what you're saying, but on the other side of that, if that is the model, then folks that are going to invent that new thing, whatever that intellectual property is, the service or product, then the goal is let's build it, get it to where someone is going to pay us millions of dollars. So there is still an incentive. You're just not going to stay at the helm and continue to develop your baby, right? You're going to pass.
And once it's sold, it stopped being innovated. It stopped being changed. So whatever the new idea was, if it is even a new idea, is stopped in its track, and then somebody else will bring something forward that may or may not even be an incremental change, because when you go to start a company to do that, you have to get venture capital.
Mm-hmm.
And venture capital have a very narrow window of what they want. They want to see a really big payback for the money they put into it. So you may or may not be able to get venture capital. The farther out into innovation verse you are, the less chance you're going to get venture capital. So you're going to keep it within the wheelhouse. You get through that if you sell it to a company and take the money and go, then they've got this kind of innovative thing that they will sell, but that's where it stops. There is no more innovation into that. It's just another product in the catalog.
So then why sell it? They're not forced to sell it.
No, but that was their business model. That's how they got venture capital, because they were going to get venture capitalists are going to get a major payout when the company sells to like a larger company.
So what you're saying is that the venture capitalist says, "Hey, I will invest in this with the expectation you're going to sell it in 5 years."
Right.
That's the only way you're going to get this money.
And I will get 100 times back for what I invested.
But they're forcing the sale, is what you're saying.
That's the model. You can't get money unless you are building this model, because that's where all the money is now.
So that's what I mean about creating co-conspirators, right?
Yes.
So it's like, hey, I have this idea. I want to, instead of maybe crowdsourcing, I'm going to go to this venture capitalist that says, hey, yeah, we'll give you some money. You'll go ahead and build your baby, but we're going to sell this baby and we're going to get, 15x on our investment. But it's going bye-bye. So again, we're locked into this thing where many of us know that it's not good for us, but we're going to do it anyway because
the trap now just snapped. That's a process that we are stuck in, and we're all pushing the buttons on the process, and it's not forwarding us as a species.
And to be clear, I just want to state, we're speaking in generalities, at least I am. I'm not by no means saying that every innovator and every small business or medium-sized business is doing this.
No, but it is getting exponentially harder for small businesses to get investment to be able to grow.
So I will tell you, there was a I guess maybe you call it a venture capitalist that approached G2 a few years back, and they would give us an infusion of cash if they had majority decision making for G2. And while it would have been very helpful at the time, I don't think G2 would have been G2 if some outsider that has no idea the passion and the mission and the vision and our values would be carried on, and they would just look at it from a dollars and cents standpoint.
So I have a theory about that. You want to hear my theory?
Let me pop it up there. Go ahead.
Okay. My theory about that is that the venture capitalist who was approaching G2 to give you an infusion of money had an idea about a buyer that was going to make them 15x on their investment somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
And then G2 wouldn't exist anymore anyhow.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So this is the way that our processes work in here. We are locked into these processes that we buy into, and are co-conspirators in, whether we are employees of an organization or an inventor or even an investor or CEO. We are locked into these short-term thinking systems and not working on the larger picture. And those processes are making us slaves to a failed system.
You know what's interesting? Like slave is a
Very,
trigger word for me.
yeah.
I'm triggered, not for the reasons you think. The only reason I'm triggered by that is slavery seems like it's something that's involuntary. And again, because not all, business innovators and business creators do this and sell out through venture capitalism or the desire to create something that they then can go and sell and not manage and grow and innovate that thing. That's not slavery, right? That's
No, but poverty is. They're not in poverty. People are not in poverty because of their choice. They're in poverty because they're forced to be in poverty because there isn't any reasonable means out of poverty. Prices on rent are going up, prices on food are going up, salaries are not going up, job opportunities are not growing. They are or growing in retail, but not growing in corporations. There aren't manufacturing jobs here anymore. This is an issue that continues to go. People who are almost 50% of the country now are in poverty through no choice of their own. They're trapped by the system.
50% to no
40,
choice.
46%.
Again, I would disagree with that also, right? We have a lot of folks that live beyond their means. We have a lot of folks that bring children into the world when they're not in a position to adequately care for themselves, let alone a child. Folks that have pets that are not service animals, that have these pets that they can't take care of.
Fred, don't listen to him.
that you see in the Humane Society because folks have ditched their animals or they've released them into the woods and just all these different things. So I think the number, and we're not saying, I know you're not saying all, but I don't think that number is quite the 47. I might say there might be a split in there.
Well, it's not quite the 47, it's a 46.
Our behavior of over consumerism, right? We're 5% of the global population, but we consume oftentimes 25% or more of the world's of
our 2.5 planets.
It's ridiculous, right? So I think there is an accountability that we have to take. And yes, there's always gonna be poverty, right? And we've got our bell curve, and it's very skewed because of capitalism and some other factors that I think people are at the lovers of, as I said before. However, there are several people that put themselves into this cyclical and generational poverty mindset because of their behaviors and their choices, right? And to not say that there are institutional things and systemic things that try to bear down on folks that are trying to get escape velocity out of poverty, but there are several folks that are the orders of their own demise, if you will.
Yeah, and part of it is that we have a machine that is set to do exactly that.
I'm just a firm believer in self-accountability. While all these other things are happening at the same time, both things can be true at the same time. I think there is a folks are gonna be mad at me, a victim mindset that is, or the mindset is so hyper focused on the victimization of institutions and systems that are in place that they say, well, this is the reason why I'm in the situation, or this is what's going on, is because of these factors. And if this didn't exist, this would no longer be true. And I don't agree with that. I think, yes, these have an overwhelming push really hard in a very concentrated way in that. But at the same time, there are folks that choose their situation, right? My dad had a saying, because we grew up poor, you can be poor, but you didn't have to be dirty. You could be poor, but our yard wasn't going to look junky. And so we had our chores. We had to vacuum every day. Even if it didn't need to be vacuumed. As a kid, it didn't need to be
What?
vacuumed.
You had a vacuum cleaner?
But we were teaching. He was teaching skills, right? And teaching that you didn't have to have a poverty mindset, and also not putting the value on money and putting a value on family and love and community, and really framing that in a different way, right? And so while I may not have the discretionary funds to go on vacation and do all these other things, we were more well adjusted and had a better quality of life than many people that could take that vacation every other month, or they would go to school and you'd have the summer vacation and folks would come back and we went to Disneyland and we did this. There was no such thing as a staycation. I stayed home and watched Reading Rainbow and had to write book reports on it, right? I mean, that was my childhood growing up. I know it's horrible. I hate that song Reading Rainbow, but it taught me so many values and I learned so much that those things have taken me into my
God,
adulthood.
you had such a light childhood.
Oh man, I could tell you some
I
stories.
came up with my daughter, and I had to listen to the Barney song. I'll listen to the Rainbow song 100 times before I have to listen to Barney again.
No, I'm talking about when you were a kid. You're talking about
Yeah,
your daughter, right? What did
yeah.
you have to go through as a child?
I had Sheriff John.
You had who?
Sheriff John. It was a Southern California thing. I had
Okay.
Hobo Kelly and Sheriff John were our Reading Rainbow. Remember, I'm a little older than you are.
Yeah, like
So
1850 Hobo John.
no,
What?
Hobo Kelly,
Hobo Kelly?
female clown that had a show, and a guy named Sheriff John, who was our Mr. Rogers of the time.
Was this black and white?
Yeah, black and white television, very 50s TV. So
Oh
yeah,
man.
long before that. But you say that it is heavily stacked against people, and I won't argue that there is some victim mindset. But every time we make a chance to start moving forward a little bit, planned obsolescence gets in our way. Our car breaks down, and we can't afford to fix it because we're making $15 an hour. We're leaving our house because the owner's selling it, or they're raising the rent 20%, and we can no longer afford to live there. Food going up 30, 40%. And all of this happening at the same time while nobody is talking about inflation. And this has been going on for 30 years. And now we're talking about inflation at this point, but the prices have been going up steadily for a long, long time.
And that goes back to we the people, our favorite phrase. When do we hit the tipping point where we say no more and we are going to control the conversation? We're seeing that.
Right, Rob.
Oh, let me see. They pop it up there. I don't even know about this stuff, Mark. At least I had Captain Kangaroo.
Kangaroo. Yep.
I might have had Captain Kangaroo too. And
Okay.
Roger
Yeah.
Rabbit also.
Anyway, yeah, it's use a term I don't even know what I can say on YouTube or not, but it's a shit show, and it's been one for a very long time, and it's part of the process that's been going on. You've heard me argue that there's a cancer in our culture, and that cancer is continuing the propagation that we've had that we've talked about: capitalism, wealth of the few, overuse of resources. So it's all very short term thinking. And you said that, I'm talking about a train wreck. Yes, I am talking about a train wreck because we're all on a train and the bridge is out and we need to come together. And we have to come together, and we, the people, have to figure some of this out. But we, the people, are in a process that we believe in because we've been told it works, like we've been told the American dream works,
Mhm.
and we're finding out it doesn't. And we live in a mythology, and the reality around us is the dragon's getting ready to eat our butts, and we're not even seeing it coming.
That's funny that some folks are just finding out that's the case. And that's why I believe that this system has never worked,
No
because
argument here.
people weren't even included from the origin of it, and so it could never work. Um, again, the issue for me is we are the many. What will it take for our voices to be the one that's heard? I know that they pit us against each other. Uh, they're going to have us have competing interests. I need transportation, you need housing, this person needs mental
Food.
health, this one, yeah, right. And so we aren't able to come together and say, look, you know, we may not, and we've talked about this a couple years ago on the show, right?
Oh, we've
When we
talked
were
this
having
about a bunch of times on this show.
well, we were having a discussion on the hierarchy of what do we address first? Do we
Yeah.
address racism or housing? Do we address, food or, gender equality? And so those things become very difficult because you would have a different hierarchy than I have a different hierarchy, right?
But if we sit
And
down and talk about it, we can find places to start together.
maybe that would be the hope. What I see, because I sit in a lot of groups where the advocacy is for whether it's environmental equity, racial equity, gender equity, yada, name them all, right? And we're all in the same room, all, you know, uh, immigration equity, all these different things, but everyone is focused on their thing, right? So, yes, we all need to eat and we all need to have affordable housing, but the job is to grab the funds and grab the resources for your group, right? And if that should how benefit another group, fantastic. We all stand in solidarity with each other, but we are advocating for our specific group. And so even there, it's it's very segregated, even though we're sitting here in a coalition. And it was intentional for us to be together to do just what you're saying, and it still ends up being segregated. And then when
Because
you
you're
look at it,
because you're competing for money.
right? And when you look at it, and money is the
How can you
is
cooperate when there's a competition for what you need at the very core?
yeah.
Oh, I have a friend from Trinidad who's just joined us, Shafina,
Hey,
and she is a good friend of mine from my international group that I talked to you about, and it's the first time she's been on the show. So, and it is evening for her. She's 3 hours ahead of us.
well, let me hit the horn. Here we go. All right, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so she's from Trinidad Tobago, and she and I have had a lot of conversations about food security there and about culture. And she's been following the Kitsap Resiliency Project for a while, looking for where we're going to be going. So, as we're talking about that, how can you have cooperation when you have competition for money? Again, money is the key piece that's tearing people apart instead of them all coming together and cooperate. And if you go to somebody and say, "Hey, can I get some of that grant money so that I can do?" No, the conversation suddenly ends.
So, do you think? So, this is interesting. As we're talking about it out loud, I don't know if I've been in a space where we've actually had this discussion. Would it be an equitable thing to just give everyone the same amount of funds? Some would argue no.
Well, I would ask how that would function. It's first of all, funds are not readily available, and there's less of them now than there have been before. And we've
Again,
talked a lot
disagree
about
with
that.
that, sir.
Huh?
I sit in spaces where they are handing out tens and hundreds of millions of dollars inside this country and out.
So why don't you have tens of millions of or hundreds of millions of dollars?
Exactly what I stated, the inequity, right? We
Yeah.
all come together, we're sitting in these groups, and even within those groups, some groups get the lion's share of those resources, or those resources are farmed out, right?
Yep.
So, case in point, we have, a bunch of money going to Ukraine, right? We've got a bunch of money going to Israel and other places. We have some money going to African countries. Some of those African countries that receive money are only receiving money if they're willing to adopt a progressive stance on LGBT rights, right? So there's the caveat there. Now we
Hmm.
have
That's the carrot. So what's the
and
stick?
the stick, right? Because you
And
can starve to death unless
yeah.
you adopt what we believe is morally right.
Hmm.
And how dare the United States do that, right? But
Well,
that's a whole nother conversation. But we also have Haiti, where the United States has definitely meddled in their politics, right? And has
and,
destabilized that country.
yeah, and look how good they're doing right now because
And
we
look
got
how good
involved.
they're doing, right? And
Yeah.
so there's again a carrot and a stick. We're the world police, but part of it is that we're going to manage the resources globally because we don't want our opponents and our
So,
enemies to have access to that.
so I want to make a quick statement on Haiti.
Mhm.
They have decided to stay hands off on Haiti right now because stated point, let me finish.
Okay, how about that? Oh,
Stated point is that we have screwed it up so much for so long that we're willing to help, but we have to know where to help and not just run in there and do what we always do. Because if we do what we always do, we'll get what we've always got, and they're going to be in bigger trouble. And I think that's actually, for once, a reasonably wise decision.
no, it's not. So now you have, this gentleman barbecue that is taking over the country. You have folks that are dying and starving, just as they are in Palestine and Ukraine and everywhere else. And now it's like, well, we foobarred it. Let's just go hands off and let them kind of figure it out now.
Well, that's not exactly true. They're willing to send aid and are sending aid and are funding people to send aid, but they're not getting involved in the politics of the country like we have
How
in
do
the
you
past.
send aid when the gangs and militias and other entities are blocking the aid from getting in? It's like, you guys did this. You set up the coup and you set up puppet governments, and now we want to be hands off. We'll keep sending you the aid. Good luck getting it, right? This is exactly what's happening in Palestine and Israel. But these things have been happening on the continent of Africa and Haiti for how long, right?
Yeah. So what are you advocating we're doing? What process are you advocating that we do to fix the problem that exists currently that we set up and screwed up with?
I'm not, because I am part of the segregated group, right? I've got to advocate for foundational Black Americans. I got to advocate for poor Americans. I've got to advocate for homeless Americans. I have all these subgroups that I advocate for, those that have transportation inequities, food inequities, and whatnot. So that has to be my priority. So while I see these global issues, for me, charity starts at home. And yes, I don't control what our government does. In a way, we do, because we vote, right?
Mhm.
But once we vote someone in, like a Bernie Sanders, we are not, and I'm not an advocate of Bernie. I just want to be clear on that. But I'm just using him because a lot of progressives like him and see him as a hero. You get him into office, but then the work really begins, and there's not enough support. We even see this in our local politics, right? We get the person elected, or we have been somehow hurt or offended. We show up to city council, and then once that issue is done, we're no longer at city council again until the next thing happens. But that's really when the real work goes on. And those that are going to show up week in and week out and make their voices heard, no matter how much we think their voices are ridiculous or crazy or out of line, those are the ones that get addressed and get their way, right? And we're not willing to do that. And that's where I think the really big
We
problem is. And to
we
go
have it.
back to my question to you is, would it just be equitable to say, hey, we've got $100 billion, there's 10 groups, let's just divide it by there, have at it. We don't have a better way to do it at this
So
point.
so let's get back to the theme of the show. There's two things I want to say here. First of all, let's talk about the theme of the show as a process.
Mhm.
How do you get the process changed so that happens? I don't disagree with you, but how would you get the process changed to make that happen?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is maybe a way to do it is just to divide the money evenly, even though that would be an
But that's a
inequitable way,
change.
because
But
there
that's a
are.
change. But that's a change in a process that currently exists that you would have to make it to get to where you can have an equitable exchange of that, and that process has many moving parts and many measuring parts in it, and they may be good, they may be bad. But how do you change the rules to make sure that to create the environment in which it is an equitable exchange? That's what our so you've talked about all of the organizations that need that money that are all doing this really good work, and I agree with you, they're all doing this really good work, but they're all stemming the flow of blood from a dying body. And our focus, as I repeat, going back to remind you, our focus is let's cure the cancer so that we can then have some chance of healing the body. But so that's why we're kind of stepped back from all of the rest of that. But I agree with you that everybody who's doing that work needs more money and more resources than they get now. The question is, how do you get to the people to have the money and resources to get them to provide the money more equitably to a larger group of people?
So I'm gonna answer that question, then I'm gonna pose a question to you. So the way that
Okay.
you do it is just how we do or how we should do with politics from the bottom up, right? We
Right.
do that through our city government with grants that they provide, right? That
Yeah.
should be an equitable way right off the bat. Then we do it at the county level, then we do it at the state level, and then move up that way. What that would require is for us community leaders to come together and say, yes, I know you're for immigration. I know you're for gender equality. I know you're for homelessness. I know you're for mental health, substance abuse, racial equity. This is what it's going to be, and this is how we want to be. This is how we want, money to be doled out, whether it's the United Way or Commerce or the city or the county or whatever. Everyone gets 10 grand. There was 100,000. That's what the 10 organizations got. Yes, it's not enough. And this organization may have more than what they need already. So they don't really need 10. They really could have done with 3. But right now, this is what we're going to do. And as we do that, we'll start to make little tweaks as we go and create a more equitable situation. But right now, what you're seeing is 80% is going here. And I'm going to give you an example. What they'll do is they'll say, hey, we want to have grants and contracts fulfilled by I'll call it BIPOC organizations, right?
Okay.
Or Black organizations. The caveat would be if there are no Black-led organizations, then if that organization serves the Black community, then they can get the money. And what often happens is there is no support to train up and because how are you supposed to know, right? There was a sign at Arby's a few months ago that said looking for workers at Arby's, and they wanted experience. And I was like, how the hell are you supposed to get experience for a fast food job? That's supposed to be entry level, right? I mean, it's ridiculous on its face. So if we're going to have Black-led organizations as an example, but no one has experience in grant writing and managing large funds and writing the reports in the way that they are traditionally ran because bigger corporations have staff that they can pay to do all these different things and one person isn't wearing 5 hats, then that's how you address the issue. And then you don't scapegoat it and say, well, this organization serves the Black community, so we're going to go ahead and give them the money. And then that just keeps the status quo going. So you break that.
Excuse me just a second. I got to go get some hats.
Hey, but I think that would be what you do.
Yeah, that's possibly what you do, or the people that got 5 or got 10 and need 3. And if you're working in cooperative coalition, that's when you sit down in the coalition and say, okay, I have more than I need by this much money. Who needs more?
No one believes that. No one believes they have more than they need. They always believe they need more.
Okay, so the argument that they only needed 3 but have 10 is.
But that's my perspective that they only need 3, but they're getting 10, right?
But there's no way you can know that because you're not doing the work they're doing.
Because I'm looking at it from my bank account compared to their bank account, right? They've got a $3 million budget. I have a $300,000 budget, right? So when I'm looking at we're both going to get 10 grand, it's like, man, they got 3 million. That 10 grand ain't doing nothing for them, right?
But on the other hand, you have no idea of the cost of the work that they do.
Doesn't matter. Right?
I understand that, but it's a matter of equitability. Equity is important.
I want you to make a fair argument with me. Right now, you're just kind of throwing stuff out there, right? To be devil's advocate.
Not really. I'm saying that you don't know because people challenge us all the time. Say, what are you doing?
Go back off of my original argument, right? Okay. You've got a Black organization as an example. This could be an Asian organization, could be whatever, right? That historically does not have the grant writers and the expertise to do these things. And you have Cisco and other Boeing and whatnot that have all these things and are able to go after those things, right? Yes, they need some money. I don't know how their internal workings are going. However, all of that said, we will never get here, or very few, the 1%, and we can trickle that out when we look at the government contracts breakdown, which I'm going to be looking at. And someone in the community has asked me, I'm on the audit committee for the city of Bremerton, for those that may not know. And some community folks have come to me and said, hey, we would like to know what is the breakdown of contracts and grants that are given out by the city from a racial standpoint. So I'd like to see a report on that. I see you laugh, right? So transparency first comes. We need to have the knowledge of that.
You're speaking in generalities to a great degree.
Okay.
I've actually suffered through several grants that I've written, and I will tell you that I would never get any of them even when I started, because I saw the people that were making the decisions. They were all mid-level people in the process of bureaucracies making decisions on things they have no idea about. And so they always go with a known entity. Always. Always go with a known entity.
You are absolutely right. Let me give you the horn for that, which is, again, is part of the problem.
Which is why I don't waste a lot of time writing grants or being in competitive grant situations, because I don't feel like being a gladiator. But I'd like to go back, while we have a few minutes left, I'd like to go back and address some of the earlier conversations we had about how we get people engaged, how we get people to become aware. And you know where I'm going with this. We start growing food. We create gardens in neighborhoods. We get people talking to each other and working together with mutual benefit, and they start talking about other things. It's not fast. It's not going to net you what you want, but it will net a better picture overall as people engage and bring their pieces to the puzzle and feel more secure because they have food. And we create a greater food security in Kitsap County. We create continuity in Kitsap County, and we stop having million-man marches or million-women marches and one time done, and no one pays attention to it after that. We get a group of people that decide on priorities that they have agreed on together and start working in a grassroots network to make change. That's how you get it done.
Why isn't it getting done?
Because we aren't growing food. You're growing food, Greg's growing food, I'm growing food, but we are not growing food.
So
we are black, we are white, we are Asian, we are rich, we are poor, we are male, we are female, we are transgender, we are LGBTQ, we are a pregnant woman. We are all of these things, but we are not we.
Can't be.
Because
again,
we are all human. We are all human.
I'm glad you answered the question, because that was my question back to you was, what do you think we should do? What is the starting point? And you believe that it's food. So
I believe that it's the process of growing food together.
Elaborate on that.
Well, what's the goal of resilient ecosystems and the resilient projects? Every neighborhood in Kitsap County has a community garden and a food forest. We're actually well on the way to achieving a lot of that this year. And we're going to be doing more because people are interested in food security, because we are food insecure in this county. We have food deserts in this county.
You got that right.
So we need to create that. And when people start getting 80-20, when 20% of the people are creating that and the 80% suddenly realize they've got free food available to them, offered freely to them by neighborhoods, and people to help show them how to start growing more food and creating that in another neighborhood, and the process of the win-win and working together. And then you start the conversation about, well, we don't know what the water is doing in this area, and let's make sure that we all have clean water, because without clean water, we can't have food. Without clean water, we don't live more than 2 days. So let's figure out how that works. So you start that conversation. And
well, hold on. Let me stop you, because I think you're on to something. What I'm going to ask
what you mean? My life work means something? Oh my God!
No, I like it. What I'm going to ask you to do, I know you're super busy. Can you put something on the pages where people can engage in that particular piece, right? Because if that's what you believe the solution is, then, and no one else has a solution, then we should try it in earnest. What happens, everyone, if we actually try it?
Yeah, funny you should mention that, because we now have 7 gardens moving forward, and I just created a form to create a database for people who want to start gardens.
No, what I'm saying is, and yes, I know that we're doing awesome in that regard. What I'm saying is stimulating conversation to action, right? We talked about it here. You have now given people the prescription. We need to build food together, create food together, build food together. We need to create food
We
together.
need food for all. Why don't we
We
just
need
say the
food
name?
for all.
Let's not talk
Okay?
about the name of the project. Food for
So
all.
we need food for all. What does that look like? Do they agree? And how can they bring their piece? How do they see their
So
piece?
you want me to put a poll up
Maybe a poll or a
or
question,
survey?
just something to kind of keep this conversation going
Yep.
and help people to, if they get to the point where they're like, okay, you're saying it's food for all. Let's try it. Here's my puzzle piece, or I don't really know how I fit. Now we can have that conversation and start to
Or
activate people.
or
I think this is good.
and they can also show up on Sundays between 10 and noon at Cups Cafe on 4th and Pacific in Bremerton and have a conversation with us and ask us any of the questions and engage with us. We now have a 5th board member who is has been trained as a master gardener, who runs her own homestead and garden, who is engaging with us to put forward information for everybody who wants to have a garden to make it easy.
I like it. Yeah, I think that would be really beneficial and powerful. And to be clear to everyone, I think you do both. I'm not an and or type person in most ways, right? I think we need to do some higher level things where, Mark is saying, I'm not going to apply for grants. I don't want to be a part of the rat race.
Well,
We've heard
okay,
Bailey talk
so
about
let
his
me
blood money.
let me clarify that one a little bit.
Go ahead.
I am not going to apply for competitive grants for money for our organization to run. We're self-funded and we're doing okay right now. If you want to donate to us on Patreon and make us do better and move faster, please do that. But I'm not going to be in a competitive grant process for organizational funds. I will be applying for grants for funds that are directed toward a specific project. Matter of fact, we're going to be working on a grant all year to put forward for solar for low-income housing in this
Fantastic.
county.
What I want people to take away from this is that because you're not going to do that, or resilient ecosystems is not, that it should not be that they don't, because you need the Mavericks to go into these spaces and
Absolutely.
just create change, right? I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah.
Where
So just I understand. I am just removing myself from the competitive mode. Go for it. I will support you in it.
Good. All right, we got to get a final word. We've got a heart out. As you know, on the 3rd Wednesday of the month, we have the Kitsap Housing and Homeless Coalition. I hope that you will meet us over there, but I want to have Mark wrap us up with the final word. This was definitely you woke me up. I was really tired in the beginning of this podcast, and you got a little fire underneath me.
Yeah. So embrace your humanity.
Embrace your humanity. All right, I'm gonna put that in the chat. Embrace your humanity. And I would say define it. Maybe you haven't even defined what your humanity is. I think if you do that, man, there's just so much we can do. We're so powerful people. We just have to come together and make the
powerful
change.
together. We are powerful together.
We are very powerful together. So that's the challenge. As always, this is Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces. For Mark Boatwright Frost, I am R1 Cameron. This is the Conduit Network. Please flip on over and be with us for the Kitsap Housing and Homeless Coalition that starts now and at 5 o'clock, City Council. All right. As always, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Bye-bye.